My name is Matt Peterson.
My name is Paul Peterson. I am the father of Matt Peterson.
I'm Cheryl Peterson. I'm Matt Peterson's mom.
My name is Adam Whedon, and I grew up with Matt.
Well, growing up, I was a single child. My father was a Baptist preacher. Great home. My mom was also very involved with the church. She was in the choir. She played piano for the choir. Sometimes they did a special with like handbells and stuff. She was a part of that. So that's where I grew up. You know, it was church Sunday morning, Sunday night, every Wednesday, all the vacation Bible schools, all the trips, youth groups, all that. Like that was my childhood. No complaints. I mean, I had everything that I needed all the time. I had most of what I wanted. I was blessed to have, very positive influences in my life when I was growing up. Just other adults in the church that I grew up in. They took care of me like I was their own kid. And I mean, lonely at times, being a single, an only child. It has its challenges on its own, and I'm sure I drove my parents crazy a bit. But yeah, it was a good childhood. I have no bad memories really.
I believe he was a normal child. He made friends very easy. He was good in school. He was on a couple of the sports teams. He liked basketball, baseball, or t-ball back then.
He was always really happy, always enjoyed being around other kids and liked to play, and just a normal child.
We were kids in a cardboard box together. I met him in a neighborhood where many of us kids lived. And a group of us were like, we're going to go to this guy Matt's house. I'd never met Matt, but he was a name that I had heard. And we walk from one house to another, as you do in these subdivisions. And we get there, and it's about twilight, street lights are starting to come on. Kids are probably supposed to be going home, but we're standing outside of this house, nice little bi-level, unassuming. And we're out there. Somebody had rang the doorbell, but nobody was answering. And then all of a sudden, an upstairs window opens and says, "What do you guys want?" That was how I met Matt.
The church that we attended once we moved up here to Northern Kentucky, they had youth group on Wednesday night over at a separate building from the actual church. There was a gymnasium over there. That's where we all hang out at. Normally, on Wednesday nights when we're done, my mom is outside in the parking lot waiting for my friend Brandon and I. This particular night, she wasn't there. So Brandon and I decided to save her the trouble from crossing over a 4-lane highway in order to get to the gym to pick us up. So we were just going to run across the street and meet her over there. We made it, but we were on our backs. We got about halfway through Dixie Highway, and we were clear to the left. And then as soon as I looked to my right, there was 2 humongous headlights coming right at us. The pastor of Fellowship of Believers was the driver of one of the church vans, and he ran over me and my friend Brandon as we were crossing the street. I remember the impact. It didn't hurt. It just felt like pressure on my hip. And then I felt my weightless body spinning in the air. That's all I really remember. Then I came to, and there was flashing lights and sirens all over. There was people everywhere. Paramedics were tending to my friend Brandon because they found him with his head about maybe 2 inches away from the van's back tire. He got extremely lucky. But I just remember, I didn't know I passed out, and when a paramedic saw me starting to move, I was trying to get a glimpse of my friend Brandon because I knew that, well, he was right next to me and now he's not. But the paramedic pinned me down to the ground and told me, stop moving. This is for your own good. Don't move. He assured me that Brandon was alive. He was breathing, but that was about it.
I saw Matt had been struck. The other young boy that Matt was with was even more hurt. I panicked, and instead of staying with Matt and telling someone to go get Cheryl, I ran and went into the church sanctuary to get my wife.
And I was in choir practice, and Matt was across the street at the gym. And the next thing I know, somebody came in and got me and said that Matt had been hit by a car. So I went running out, of course, and then they came with the ambulance and took him to the hospital because he was with a friend.
So after laying there on the wet pavement for a while, they strapped us up to those fancy surfboards and then loaded us up into the back of the ambulance. And then we went to St. Elizabeth Hospital, and they just checked us over. Brandon had a lot of scrapes and bruises. The side of his face was all cut up. I had a really bad bruise on my right hip from the impact. Not much more. I mean, I had some scrapes on my elbows and my knees from, hitting the ground, but, luckily nothing major happened. Unfortunately, this was the point where I was introduced to opiate painkillers. They prescribed me Vicodin for the hip pain. And, I was only like 11 or 12 years old when this happened. So I didn't get addicted to them right off the bat. But even at 11 or 12 years old, I loved the way that they made me feel. My mom was in charge of them, so I didn't have access to them, but I didn't know what they were. I grew up with the DARE program, right? So if you're not familiar, I mean, their slogan is just say no, which turned out to be not very effective because, at 11 years old, I liked the way opiates made me feel, and I didn't have any education of what an opiate was, what it could do to you. I didn't know about addiction, chemical dependency, withdrawal. I knew nothing about any of that, so that was my start.
We had a mutual friend named Kyle, and we would all kind of hang out at Kyle's house in a detached garage that he had. Perfect place for, 4 teenage boys to cause trouble. And his dad at one point got a pool table. And so from 3 o'clock in the afternoon when school let out till 10 o'clock at night when, we were all supposed to go home, that was what we were doing. We were all playing pool and, wreaking havoc. It wasn't just Kyle's house that we hung out with. They'd end up at my house. They'd end up at, a number of different people's houses. There was, in the neighborhood, there was a specific cul-de-sac where out of maybe 15 kids that all hung out together, 5 different houses were in this cul-de-sac. So we would end up there a lot. Absentee parents, older siblings, you get access to the gambit of things. And that's when alcohol started showing up, and marijuana, of course. And it wasn't until later that pills and powders started showing up. But, first drinks were had in our buddy's older brother in his basement apartment, essentially. That's where all of it started.
I started seeing some attitude changes. He was meaner. He was not as respectful to his parents. I knew that he was hanging out with the wrong crowd. I found out that he had started smoking. We thought that there was, besides some behavioral changes, some reduction in grades, but just things that we could work out as a family. It's normal teenage stuff. We had no anticipation whatsoever that he was doing drugs.
Years later, I had my wisdom teeth taken out, and again, I got prescribed Vicodin for the pain. What was different this time was my group of friends. They had taught me to crush them up and snort them because they hit you faster, the high's more intense, and I was at the point in my life where I was just very insecure with myself. I didn't have a lot of self-esteem at all, so I just did whatever my friends did just to try to fit in, so that's what they did, so that's what I'm going to do, and that really kicked off my addiction. again, I didn't know anything about addiction at all. So they enjoyed doing them. I enjoyed doing them. So I just sought after them as much as I could. You know, it started off as just like a every once in a while thing whenever they came around to, you know, now we're actively looking for them. It started on weekends, and then it went to Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Then it went to Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and eventually it became an everyday thing. I was out of control before I even knew it.
It was, you know, a means of escape from the humdrum life that we all had. You know, we all had family stuff going on that nobody knew how to talk about. We're talking, you know, early 2000s, you know, late 90s, early 2000s. So literally no one has the language to even discuss these types of things yet. And if you did, you were a pussy. You know, especially in a group of guys at that age, full of piss and vinegar, you know, that was, you know, what you would hear. And so at first you don't necessarily see the changes, but then after a while, reclusiveness starts making its appearance. Oh, we're not gonna hang out today. We're busy. When you know that's not necessarily true. And then you would have different situations. Oh, this guy doesn't like this guy right now, but nobody wants to talk about why. You know. I kind of ended up taking a semi unique position amongst the group. You know, as the alcohol was flowing and the marijuana was flowing, like, you know, it was all fun and games, and then the powders and the pills start showing up, and I had already established myself as I didn't need anything more than the marijuana and the alcohol. Like I was a nerdy kid growing up, and always, you know, anything that I would ever put in my body, I read about long before I ever did it, and, you know, thought it would teach me something. I mean, what kind of books do they have at the school library? But I would read about these things, and I knew that, you know, when those things start showing up is when everything starts going awry. And you won't notice it, but it will. And it wasn't until years later that I could look back and say, oh, that's where it started happening. You know, you would have, you know, friends that, oh, we got these pills, we got these, you know, oh, this guy got coke, or, you know, what have you. And they knew that I wasn't about that. So it became a very, all right, let's not invite him around. Let's not, you know, put it, you know, whether they thought I would be a narc or not, you know, I don't know. But it was that thing of, but we're not going to have it around him because he's not going to want to partake in it. And we don't want to get judged for it.
Well, school wasn't too much of an issue at the beginning. I didn't get high before school. I would always go to school sober, mainly because I was scared to death to get in trouble or expelled or something. Hiding it from my parents, it wasn't really that hard. Like I said, my dad used to be a preacher, and my mom grew up in the church as well. So they weren't very educated about this. This was all new to them. And me being their only child, who they raised properly, you know, I don't think that they ever thought that this should be a concern of theirs. But after school, we just went over to my friend Kyle's house. You know, his dad, you know, he left us alone. He had a detached garage with a pool table in it. So we just hung out there most of the time, you know, like we'd go inside, you know, one or two at a time to the bathroom. We'd snort a couple lines of whatever we had. We'd smoke pot out in the garage, and like, I hid it from my family just by not being at the house. I had tried not to return until I knew that they were in bed. Now, eventually they started catching on. They started noticing behavioral issues with me. I was becoming more defiant. I was staying out past my curfew. I would sneak out of the house. You know, like I was on the bottom floor, so I could just open the window and walk right out, or crawl rather. And my parents wouldn't even know because they slept two floors above me.
He started wanting to sleep a lot instead of getting up and going to school, and just sneaking out at night. He butt dialed us one night from his phone, and then we realized he was outside somewhere.
Eventually, I moved out and went to college. My friend Brandon and I, we got an apartment right by Northern Kentucky University, and in our group of friends, we were the first couple that had our own place. So, of course, our place became the party spot. You know, so my parents were very standoffish at this point. You know, I'm now 18. I'm in college. You know, freshman year. So they didn't really keep an eye on me at all, and you know they shouldn't have. At this point, I should have been old enough to know, you know, what was good and bad. But again, I didn't have any self-esteem or confidence in myself, so I just kind of went with whatever everybody else was doing, you know. And it wasn't uncommon for me to come home from work and everyone was already plastered, you know. Like, actually, my first arrest came at this apartment. I closed the restaurant that I was working at, and I get home and there's probably 15 people at my apartment drinking and smoking and snorting lines off my coffee table and everything else. My roommate Brandon, I mean, he was already passed out in bed. This night I didn't even have enough time to walk up the stairs, get to my bedroom, and change clothes before the police knocked on the door because of a noise complaint. And my overly polite friends invited the police into the apartment, which was obviously brilliant. But there was a bong in the middle of the table. There was a couple, blunts in the ashtray. There was, powder on residue all over the coffee table. Like the place was a mess. I mean, it smelled like pot. Like there was no hiding that. And we were all underage, and there was just empty beer bottles everywhere. So, I mean, nobody fessed up to it. Mind you, I had just gotten home. I hadn't even had time to partake in any of this, but none of the friends that were conscious fessed up to it. My roommate was sleeping. The police told me not to wake him up. I got charged with it. That was my first real consequence from my drug and alcohol use. It wasn't too severe. They didn't even take me to jail that night. They gave me I ended up having to go to court, a couple weeks later, and the judge gave me 5 days in jail, which I did on 2.5 weekends. So I would go Friday, I'd be released on Sunday. That way I could continue to work and go to college. And since it wasn't that severe, I learned nothing from it. Even when I got to jail, at the time we were still allowed to smoke in the jail. So I had my cigarettes and my nicotine. The guy that bunked next to me had cocaine, so I was still getting high in jail. It was like a weekend getaway almost. Like I just got to lay around and watch TV all day and didn't have to worry about cleaning. I didn't have to worry about cooking, nothing. There was no responsibility at all. So when I finished my sentence, nothing changed. Nothing happened. I just continued on the same path that I was on. Not too long after this is when I realized that I might have a problem, not because of the jail time, but because I started waking up in the mornings feeling sick. And I didn't know why. I thought I just had a cold or maybe allergies or something. But my friend Kyle, he was the one that told me that, dude, you're in withdrawal. You've been doing opiate painkillers almost every day for how long now? 3-4 years? And I didn't know what withdrawal was, but it made sense, and I started to do my own research, and more information started coming out around this time about addiction and the risks of long-term opiate use. But that was just another motivator for me, like, okay, well, I don't want to stop, so I just got to make sure I always have them now. Otherwise, I'm going to be sick. I don't want to be sick, and I don't want to stop, so I'm just going to keep doing them. And it just kept progressing. It started with Vicodin, and then it got to Vicodin extra strengths, and then it went to Percocets, and then it went to Perc 10s, and then 15s, then 30s. And then eventually I found Oxycontin, which absolutely changed my life. It eventually just got too expensive, like the Oxycontin 80 milligrams that I was doing there at the end. I was doing 3 of those a day, and they're $80 a pill, $1 a milligram. And a time came, I just couldn't afford it anymore. Like, I was sick all the time, and I just couldn't keep up with my addiction. Kyle, the same guy that explained withdrawals to me, he had already switched over to heroin. I kind of cut contact with him because I knew he was doing heroin, and I was too good for that. Heroin's dirty. I wasn't a junkie. I was in pain. The van accident that I had when I was 11 or 12 years old, I always use that as an excuse. Like, my back hurt all the time. It didn't really, but no one was able to question me because I had a pretty significant accident at a young age. So in order to try to keep up with my addiction, I tried the doctors, and then I tried spine specialists. I tried, all the way up to pain management. I shopped around at different hospitals and emergency rooms and urgent cares. Eventually my resources ran dry, so I had no choice. I ended up having to contact Kyle because I was just tired of being sick. I couldn't go to work. I couldn't, go to college anymore. Actually, I think at this point I had already dropped out of college. I just couldn't handle it.
So as far as when the change happened, I would say it was we were in college, and it was when pills had already kind of been around. You'd hear, oh, I got some Perk 30s, I got, this, I got that. He lived in an apartment with a friend of ours named Brandon. And when that lease went up, he moved into a different apartment. I equate it roughly with that same time period, because it was not long after that the descent started happening, and you'd see it. You could see it in his face. You could see it in his behavior. He dropped out of college. We were students together at NKU. We weren't anymore after that.
Kyle, I asked him for pills, and he said, okay, yeah, I've got a guy. Come on, we'll go get you right. Well, he had other plans. He had zero intention on getting pills. We got up there, and he ended up getting heroin instead, and I was absolutely furious about it. But I was just too sick to stand by my morals. I had no choice. I had to say yes. I had to get rid of the withdrawal. I had to get high. So I gave in. He dumped out a little bit in front of me on a CD case, and I snorted it. I did heroin for the very first time. And since that day, I have not done an opiate painkiller in pill form since. Not once. It was all heroin after that. Similar to the opiate painkillers, my tolerance just skyrocketed. $20 worth of heroin, it used to last me, an entire day. I was doing that in one line in the morning at this point. And so then it went to $40 a day, and then $80 a day. And I got up to probably $300 or $400 a day. I did this I was continuing to work somehow, but I was combining my paychecks with my girlfriend at the time. She was a server, so she'd give me her tip money. Then I would ask my parents for money to go to the doctor. I wouldn't go to the doctor. It would go to the dope boy instead. Result in panhandling as well. I pulled every bit of money that I could possibly get every single day. It was a full-time job on its own, just trying to get the money to keep up with my addiction. And again, I took that next step. I went up to Cincinnati with a friend of mine. His name was Roy, and he used needles. I never did, but I was about 2 days in withdrawal at this particular day, and me and Roy went up to Cincinnati. I had him drive. I couldn't even drive. I couldn't sit up. I couldn't even put a full sentence together. And we pull into the Wendy's that we normally got high at, and he gave me mine on a CD case, and he prepped his stuff. He shot up and got high, and then he looked over at me, and he's like, "Something wrong? You usually have half that pile up your nose by now. What's up, bud?" All I did, I stuck my arm out and I said, "Hit me, bud." And that was it. He asked me if I was sure, and I just nodded my head. Yep, hit me. This has to end right now. He had always told me that I was wasting my money by snorting it because the high from injecting it is so much more intense. Man, he was right. I never snorted anything after that either. While he was getting my shot ready, I mean, I studied everything that he was doing because I needed to learn how to do this on my own. So I watched him dump the powder in the spoon. He drew up a little bit of water in the syringe, squirted it into the spoon. He used the other end, the plunger side, to mix it all around to dissolve it. He got out a cigarette. He ripped the filter out of the cigarette, made a little ball, stuck it on the end of the needle, drew it up. That filters out all the chunks that could potentially stop your heart. And then he just slid it in my vein and pushed down on the plunger. And that feeling, man, even right now talking about it, I can feel it. Like it started, like I felt it in my throat first, and then in my feet, and it just like this warm, heavy feeling. It just worked all the way up my body, from my feet all the way up, and it's crazy. I officially became a needle junkie that day, and if you haven't caught on to the pattern yet, it just kept progressing. Um, a $20 shot turned into a $40 shot. I was right back. I was worse off on the heroin than I was on the Oxycontin. Like I was spending just as much money on a drug that was much more powerful. I mean, there's times I think back and I'm just like, I don't know how I was able to survive that. I know now, it wasn't me that saved myself. I mean, this was a direct act of God. He showed up in the form of a police officer, and I mean, it ultimately saved my life. I was, it was just, I don't know, it was just a mess. Like I was homeless at this time. My same girlfriend that was giving me her tip money, I was living in the backseat of her car, and one night I was just hanging out with her in the backseat of her car. She goes inside of the hotel to go to the bathroom. While she was inside, I was just sitting there in the back seat, and two cops ended up coming up, and apparently there was somebody in that parking lot that was breaking into cars. And funny enough, it wasn't me this time. Usually it was, but I had nothing to do with it this time. But they saw me sitting in the back seat of the car, and that obviously looked suspicious, so they knocked on the window and asked me for my ID and stuff. I knew that eventually the police were gonna get involved and find me. I was either gonna get caught breaking the law or something. My parents had put a warrant out for my arrest for stealing their laptop and their car. So I knew the cops were after me anyway. To plan for this, I ended up going to a grocery store and I stole a few packs of sleeping pills, just over-the-counter sleeping pills, which I dumped into a cigarette pack, and I kept those on me always. They never left me. They were always in my pocket. And I made the conscious decision that when the cops finally did find me, that I was just going to take all those sleeping pills and I was just going to end it. I didn't want to go to jail. I've experienced withdrawal. I tried quitting before. I've tried rehab before, and I wanted to get sober, but I didn't want to go through all that discomfort and face the decisions that I had made and try to mend the relationships I had broken. There was just too much that I just wasn't ready to deal with or handle. So I was just going to kill myself. And that night when the cops took my license, they both went back to their cruiser, and when they were back there, I took every one of those sleeping pills. There was probably 60 to 80 of them. I was taken to Boone County Jail, and then that was a Sunday night, and I remember getting booked in Boone County Jail, and then nothing. I ended up getting woke up by a Kenton County corrections officer. I was in the hole on suicide watch in the Kenton County Jail. This was Wednesday morning, so 3 days had gone by that even today I cannot recall. I have no idea. I just remember the CO, he knocked on the window or banged on the door to wake me up, and I was just got conscious enough to hear him say, "Hey, do you know where you are?" And I responded with, "Yeah, I'm at the hospital." Because, like, obviously, as I was at the hospital, I was overdosing on sleep medication. Like, I tried to kill myself. Where else would I be? And then he held up a pink Kenton County Detention Center jumpsuit, and everything started kind of clicking. I had no clothes since I was on suicide watch. I wasn't allowed to have clothes. I was in a flame and tear resistant blanket that was maybe 3 feet long. And there was no mattress. I didn't get utensils to eat, nothing. The mattress was just a slab of concrete that I laid on that was raised up about 3 inches off the rest of the concrete ground. I was there for a total of about a month, and then I was shipped back to Boone County. My parents had filed a law called Casey's Law. In the state of Kentucky, this allows a loved one to petition to the court to have their loved one, being me in this case, court ordered into rehab or treatment of some kind. So I went back to Boone County Jail for a week. The judge that I saw in Boone County, he went through with the Casey's Law, and I was then sent to a long-term inpatient facility for men here in northern Kentucky. And that was an experience all in itself. It was extremely intense, very structured, very disciplined. Everything that most addicts are lacking in their lives, this treatment center provided. We all hated it at first, you know what I mean? Like, we just wanted to sleep in and kind of do whatever we wanted to do, but there was a lot of structure to it. We had, wake up time, breakfast time, chore time, meetings, and then another meeting, and then a class, and then another meeting, and then 2 more meetings at the end of the day, and then a bedtime. It was just, everything was laid out for us. When I first got to this treatment center, it had been probably about 2 years since I've seen Kyle. When I walked into the treatment center, I mean, he was standing there waiting for me. I didn't know he was there, but for new intakes, they have our names written down on a dry erase board. So he knew for about a week that I was coming. So when I walk in, I mean, there he was. It was very relieving, because I was in there with 120 guys who I didn't know, but I had Kyle, and also I didn't know if he was dead or alive. So to see him alive, standing in front of me in treatment, getting help, I mean, that was huge. So he showed me the ropes. He made sure I was where I needed to be at what time. He introduced me to some good people. Eventually, we got towards the end of the program. We started going to AA meetings outside of the treatment facility. So he made sure that I got to the right meetings, the good meetings. He helped build my support group. And after about 6 months of me being there, he reached the end of the program, and it was time for him to move out. So he petitioned to move out. We all voted, all right, we think that you've learned enough. We think you're ready, so good luck to you. You know where to find us if you need us. We've seen this all the time, over and over again. This happened. The client that was moving out, they'd say, oh yeah, I'll come back, I'll come pick you up for meetings. We'll hang out on the weekends when you don't have anything to do or whatever. And they never did. Very, very rarely did anybody hold that promise. But Kyle, being my best friend, I thought for sure that he'd keep his promise to me. No. Now the word came around pretty quick, just within a couple weeks, that he had relapsed and he was back out there. Just a couple months later, I mean, it was my turn. I reached the end of the program, and I was told by everybody that was in charge of voting yes or no for me to move out that, Matt, man, you've done great here. If anybody in this room is going to make it out there, it's going to be you. So, I mean, I was confident. I felt good. You know, I had like almost 10 months of sobriety under my belt at this time. And, you know, I felt ready. You know, like it was definitely nerve wracking. You know, I'd been in this treatment center for 9 months, you know, so moving out, that means I'm going to have to start working again. I'm going to have to, you know, move back in with my parents temporarily until I find my own place. I'm going to have to start paying bills again. I had a son who was born while I was in treatment. I'm going to have to learn how to be a dad all of a sudden. You know, there was a lot of big things that I was going to have to overcome when I moved out. But I felt ready. I felt confident. I had support. So I moved out. I moved back in with my parents. And man, life happens fast. The day I moved out, the day before I moved out, sorry, my grandfather passed away. And you know, treatment taught me a lot, but they didn't teach how to grieve successfully. Most of the time, an addict, if they need to grieve or if they're going through hard times, they use it as an excuse to get high. I didn't have that anymore because I wanted to stay sober. But what do I do with these feelings? What do I do with these emotions? Like, do I cry? Do I punch shit? Like, what do I do? And then just a couple weeks after I had moved out, my son, who was born while I was in treatment, he was about 6 months old now. You know, we found out that he had 2 holes in his heart and was going to have open heart surgery. The surgery went well. They said it would take about 5 hours. He was done in 3.5. Everything was successful. He's 13 years old now. He plays baseball. He's a pitcher. He's amazing. But I mean, that was a hard time. Like seeing my kid hooked up to all those machines, and he hasn't even lived yet. And maybe the worst part about it was the hospital that he had his surgery at was exactly 2 blocks away from where I used to buy my heroin from. One night, we were still at the hospital post-surgery. He was in recovery, and it's not there anymore, but there was a UDF right up the street from the hospital. So I decided that I was just going to go up and get me and my girlfriend ice cream, you know. So I went up there, and as soon as I got out of my car, there was a guy. He just pulled up next to me, and he said, "Hey, kid, boy." Boy means heroin. That's just so like I heard, "Hey, kid." I ignored it, and I walked away. As soon as I heard "boy," I immediately turned around. And he offered me a free sample, and I didn't take it, which was great. You know, that was a positive. First time I had encountered that situation since I had gotten out of treatment. Grandfather just passed away. Just had a traumatic experience with my son and his heart surgery. So that was big that I was able to do that. I told the guy, I thanked him. I was like, "Yeah, where were you a year ago? You know, when I was still getting high. I needed you then." But it never left my mind after that. Because I was in the hospital, I wasn't going to meetings. I wasn't calling my sponsor. I didn't have any contact with the treatment center anymore. Like I made my son my main priority, which for a normal person, that's what you should do. I'm not a normal person. I'm an addict, a heroin addict. So I just sitting in that hotel room, stressed out anyway. Like I just began to obsess over it. I couldn't stop thinking about it. So it wasn't 2 days later, I just went out looking for it. And I knew from my past experience that all I had to do was park at a random gas station and someone would eventually find me. All I had to do was be a white kid in Kentucky and I could find it. That's exactly what happened. I took some money. I went to a gas station. I mean, it wasn't 10, 15 minutes probably before somebody pulled up next to me. We locked eyes. He hopped in my car. We made the exchange. And then I drove back to my parents' house. Nobody was there. The house was empty. And I got high. I relapsed. I had right around 1 full year sober. Didn't last too long. I regretted it. But since I had relapsed, I mean, that obsession and that just overwhelming feeling that it gave me returned, and it was all I could think about anymore.
Paul was in a job where he had the money for expenses for a lot of the staff at the hospice where he worked, and no matter where we hid it, he found it. And we were missing money. I don't know how many times we replaced it. Money was missing out of my purse. One time I caught him in my purse trying to take my car keys because he was going to go do something. I don't know. I probably know now what he was going to do, but at the time I wasn't sure.
Our own personal money, private money that I had kept for safekeeping for other people, tools, DVDs, were all missing. His biggest issue was $40. All I need is $40. I've ran out of gas. I need some more cigarettes. I need a snack after work. It was all that, and it wasn't until when he was arrested that we found out that a heroin hit was $40.
Well, the easy one with that one, we'll be talking about Kyle, because like I said, I was his phone call when he was down and out, and literally his dad wouldn't answer his phone calls, none of his siblings would answer his phone calls. You know, his brother kicked him out of his mother's house, you know, because there's that whole story I'm not sure if you're aware of, but you know, when we were in 8th grade playing music together, Kyle's mom died of a heart attack suddenly, and he could not have been closer to another person. And so that's where his path veered off, and you know, he was constantly looking for something to fill that void. And his older brother ended up with her house. When Kyle turned 18, he got half of a life insurance policy, so he's got this bag of money now and a budding drug addiction. It was gone in a year, all that money. It was about 50 grand, if I remember correctly. But it was that thing of like, okay, you know, when time came for him to try and get better, I was always a phone call. And I was always there. I told him this on several occasions. I was always there to try and make him better. I'm not going to enable you. I had to learn later what enabling actually entailed and found out that I wasn't as good at it as I thought I was, but it was that thing of like, you know, I need help. Okay, I'm here to help you. If that's what actually you want, I'm here to help you. And, you know, he tried several times. Matt, you know, I imagine was a similar situation. You know, I stopped hanging out with Matt or hearing from Matt after that apartment that he started going down the rabbit hole in. It was around that time that I was like, okay, this is not the life that I'm trying to lead, and I've got to look out for myself. You know, honestly, if he needed me, I wanted him to know that I was there for him, but I couldn't hold his hand through the thing. You know, and as it is with most people, you know, these guys aren't the only drug addicted people that I know, whether in recovery or in active addiction, and they never want the help that they actually need. They want what they think is the help. And you can try to do that and fail, or you can steadfastly say, this is the only help you can get from me, and then wait to hear from them again. And that's you know, what my experience with their initial attempts at becoming sober were. You know, and anybody in recovery will tell you it's never just once. You know, there's always, you know, they say it all the time, relapse is a part of it. And, you know, through my own personal journey and through friends that I've gotten to witness, that's obviously a part of it, but you have to come back to it. You have to come back to one. And I've been lucky. I've had music and the work that I do to like hold me to a standard. So anytime that felt like it was falling off because of anything that I was doing, I could always go to like, well, you're not playing as well as you used to. Maybe figure that part out first and then move forward from there. And so when, you know, at one point, and I've had this conversation with Matt, it was kind of embarrassing. I had an apartment. I was doing okay. I made some money. I'm living on my own, not borrowing money off of your parents like every kid does for the first, however long it takes to get some footing. I finally was in a spot. I wake up one morning and I get a phone call from Matt. Now, I have not heard from Matt in years, better part of a decade, probably. And as soon as I see his number, I'm like, oh God, what's he going to want? Is he going to want money? The last time I had talked to Kyle before that, he had begged me to let him stay at my house, and I had to tell him no, because the last time I let him do it, he took my car. He brought it back, but he was gone for 3 hours to go get milk. Pick a thing. You know, everybody's going to be familiar with that.
At first, we didn't know. We just didn't believe it, because we'd never been around that. So we didn't know what to expect. And then we started noticing, like you said, the things that were missing. And there was one time that he stole our laptop, and we found out where it was, and we went to get it. And that was about the second or third time that he had stolen something like that. And we went to the police, and we just told them, that this was missing, and we knew that he had taken it. And we did eventually press charges. And one time when I was at the police department, one of the ladies told me about Casey's Law. And they said when they are that much out of control, they really don't know what they're doing.
I first really found out that he was doing drugs. It was finally confirmed to me when we were in the town where my family lived, either for Christmas or Thanksgiving. And it was for Christmas. And we had taken in a bag of candy from the car to snack on that night into the hotel. He wasn't satisfied with that. He had to have his bag, and he insisted on it. I began to suspect that something was out in the car that he did not want us to find. He went to bed angry. He wouldn't speak to us. The next morning, early before he got up out of bed to make the trip home, I went out to the car and did a thorough search of the trunk, and I found a burnt spoon and syringe needles. I didn't find any drugs, but I knew what the other two items were for.
So what did you guys do when you found that?
He and I talked in private for a long time. And then he finally admitted to me that he was addicted to heroin. He went upstairs, admitted to his girlfriend and his mom that he was an addict. He tried to rectify things in the community, going to people that he owed money to, and square things up with them. I thought he was ending things. But there were still some things that weren't right. He had minor brushes with the law. I was the one who took him to Campbell County Jail for the first time. I bawled like a baby. He finally admitted that he was suicidal. We took him to the hospital. He was admitted to the hospital overnight. I had to convince the nurses to keep him because they were ready to let him go the very next day. And I'll never, ever forget the feeling that I had as I walked down the hallway alone, all by myself, hearing my son cry, "Dad, don't do this. Don't do this. Please, Dad." He pleaded with me. And I knew if I looked back to say I'm sorry, or I love you, or even just to look him in the eye, I would lose it and take him right back. But he had to stay for his own good. And he ended up staying for a week.
You know, and my parents, they were much smarter at this point. You know, they knew what to look for. They knew the signs. So once they caught me, you know, we tried, you know, we tried Suboxone. I was against it. I tried telling my parents, like, I know people that's tried that and it doesn't work and all this. In reality, I just didn't want it to work. I just wanted to continue to get high. But they strong-armed me into doing it, so I ended up going to the doctor. Now, they told me to go 24 hours without getting high before I take my first dose of Suboxone. I got high that morning. I might have been sober for 3.5 hours before taking my first one. Immediately went into withdrawal after I took the Suboxone. So I called the doctor. I'm like, "Look, man, this made me feel way worse. Like, what is going on?" And he told me to take a second one. He called it loading up, which I've done research since then, and I've never read anything or heard that term again. Like, I don't know if that guy, I don't know, but don't recommend. So I took the second one, felt even worse. But to my advantage, I was able to tell my parents, "See, I told you it wouldn't work." They didn't give in though. They pretty much locked me in the house and wouldn't let me go anywhere. They took the keys to the car. You know, I just laid there in bed and didn't move. Just miserable. Ended up getting desperate enough that I started making some phone calls and I was just gonna rip somebody off in order to get heroin. But instead, one contact that I made, he told me that Suboxone was actually valuable on the street. You know, I could get $20 a piece for them. And I had just gotten a full month prescription, 3 a day for a month, you know, so what's that, 90 of them. I mean, I hit the jackpot, you know. I just started dealing these things out. I started selling them, you know, like my parents didn't count them. So, you know, I was able to get rid of all of them, you know, and I just bought heroin instead. And then finally my heroin career came to an end. Me and a girl that I was working with, she also used heroin. We ended up going to Cincinnati before we opened the restaurant. We picked up, and I was so sick, I just couldn't wait to get back to the restaurant. So I ended up pulling off the Newport, Kentucky exit, and we pulled into the parking lot of Kroger's. And we got high there. For a second time, God showed up in the form of a police officer. And as soon as I got done with my shot, I looked to my left, and there's a police officer walking right towards me, like eye contact. He looks angry. So like he just comes up, knocks on the window. I roll it down. I just put my hands up. There was no fighting it. He watched me do it. I thanked him for allowing me to finish my shot before he decided to bust me. That was very kind of him. But yeah, I ended up going to Campbell County Jail. I was there for, I don't know, probably a total of 3 months maybe. And I was let out on work release. So I was able to work and, you know, still support my family and try to make up for some mistakes that I had made. And I never got high again after that. That was it. When I was in jail, you know, like I had the experience from being in a long-term treatment. So I already knew what to do. I knew how to stay sober. I had just been sober for a year. I knew I could do it. I still had my connections, my contacts in AA. My sponsor, he welcomed me back with open arms. He was just relieved that I was alive. And so I just kind of picked back up where I left off. You know, I started going back to AA meetings. I rebuilt my support group. Got my old home group back, which was out in Alexandria, Kentucky, and I started living again. I was about 3 months sober, and I started working at a different restaurant, and quickly fell in love with one of the servers. Her name was Megan, and we ended up. So I was really, really attracted to her at first. You know, like I ended up nudging the cook next to me one night, you know, during the dinner rush. And I'm like, yo, who is that? He was like, that's Megan. She's dating one of the other servers, though. Don't even bother. Well, neither of us knew that she had just broken up with him. So turns out she was on the other side of the expo window, nudging the server next to her, asking who's the new cook, being me. Things moved pretty quick. You know, I think we moved in together probably 4 or 5 months after we started dating. And, you know, she was a personal trainer on the side too, which she began doing full time. And there was one night, one of the clients that she had that I introduced to her, well, she usually comes back from his house from the personal training around like 8:30 maybe. This particular night, she didn't come home till about 1, so I, you know, obviously knew something was up. Well, you know, my fears became reality. I ended up moving out, and I ended up calling up Kyle. I knew he got sober again, and he was living in a sober living house. So he was my first phone call. I called him to see if he had any suggestions or if there was any room at his sober living house or if he knew of another room that I could have. And he responded with, yeah, man, like I'm down here right now. My roommate just moved out. Like you can have the bed right next to me. So, I mean, it worked out perfectly, you know. I mean, again, Kyle came through to basically save me. You know, I was crushed over this breakup. Like, you know, I had planned the future with this girl. And, you know, he took days off work. He skipped meetings. He broke plans with his girlfriend and his other friends just to make sure that I wasn't going to do something stupid. And, you know, after I got back on my feet, you know, he went back to work. You know, we had our own lives to live, you know, but we were doing it together. We were both sober. We were both happy, both had jobs, living life, you know, everything was great. And then he started getting a little distant again. And I automatically, like right off the bat, I picked up on the patterns. And, you know, I never confronted him about it, mainly because he just kind of stopped staying at the sober living house. So I didn't really see him at all. But I knew he had relapsed. Well, one night before I was getting ready to go to work, he ended up coming to the sober living house, and I had enough time. We went up to a pizza joint up the road from where the sober living house was, and we ate pizza in my car. And that was the first and only time I had ever seen Kyle cry. He broke. He admitted that he was getting high, which I already knew. But he told me that there was a guy that he was working with that gave him some pills to sell. Well, he ended up taking them instead. And then that triggered him, and he got right back on heroin again. He pleaded with me not to go to work. He didn't know what to do. He was afraid of what was going to happen to him if he continued. And, I mean, I had to work, you know, like I had the next 2 days off. So I just told him, I'm like, look, man, just go back to the sober living house. You're high right now. Sleep it off. Watch a movie. I'm off the next 2 days. So I'm yours the next 2 days. We'll get you into detox. We'll get you back into the treatment program. We'll take you to meetings. Whatever we got to do, we'll get you right. Just go back to the sober living house, and I'll be with you when I get off work. And that was, that was the last conversation. that I ever had with him. A couple days go by, no contact. So I called the owner of the sober living house, and I told him, I'm like, look, he's getting high. He told me that. He hasn't been staying here. He's weeks behind on rent. I know there's other people that needs this bed, so why don't we just go ahead and pack him up so we can get somebody else in here. The guy that owned the sober living house said, well, I was at Walmart earlier today, and I thought I saw his van, so maybe he's sleeping in his van. I said, all right, I'm on my way there. He said, me too. So we met there, and we we found Kyle. He was he had overdosed in the back of his van, and he was dead. After the coroner left with Kyle, I mean, me and his family, I mean, we were really tight. They would invite me over for dinner or for pool or for a family just get together, whatever, regardless if Kyle was there or not. Like, they considered me family. Like, we were very, very tight. So I went with 2 Fort Wright police officers to Kyle's parents' house so I could inform them. And I mean, it was late. I banged on the window, finally woke his parents up, and then they answered the door. We entered. His dad sat down, and I couldn't even get the words out. I couldn't say it. So his dad just looked up at me, and he said, he's not dead, is he? I said, yeah, man. That's all I could say. And those are 2 images that are never going to leave. Finding Kyle like that, and the look on his dad's face when I had to tell him, it's haunting. Obviously, it still hurts. You know, I hold a lot of regret because of it. Because when I needed him, he was there. When he needed me, I decided to go to work for $8.50 an hour. Been told it's not my fault. Don't beat myself up over it, but I mean, it's not that easy. You know, I don't know who else he reached out to, if anybody. I could have been the only person he told. It was the biggest lesson of my life was that when an addict reaches out for help, everything else needs to go on hold. Everything.
And so I get this phone call from Matt, and I'm like, yeah, man, what is it? You know, because I'm trying to be strong for myself because one of my oldest friends is now calling me, and he's going to give me some line that 50-50 shot I fall for because I care about him. Kyle's dead. That was the phone call. I sat down. I remember it clear as day. I was dressed for work, literally about to go open the restaurant, and I sat on that toilet because I was in the bathroom. Sat down and felt it in that moment. I went, I worked, and I did all of that, but it was that thing of like, you know, when all the word comes out and all that kind of stuff, what do you do? Your brother's dead. Because he was a brother to me, and I still think of him that way. You know, I thought of him this past week when I went to the gravesite. You know, I try and stop out there anytime I'm nearby because he's with me everywhere I go. And I know the same is true of Matt. You know, I'm a musician, so I write songs, and I think Matt asked to use it in his book and all that kind of stuff. And, you know, anytime anybody asks me about the funeral, like, I just tell them, listen to the song. You know, it's a perfect, you know, It's the most articulate I could be. I don't want to say perfect because no song can be perfect, but it's as articulate about that experience as I could be. The funeral was wild, you know, where half of them are family who I've known since I was, 12, 13, and half of them are new sober friends that he had met in recovery. You could see the work that he had put in, literally out of 40 people, 20 of them are through recovery. We're standing at the gravesite. They're about to lower the casket. The preacher, whoever, officiant, says, "Is there anything else that anybody wants to say?" And I let it hang in the air for a second, and I say, "Fucking asshole." What else do you say? And I watch half of the crowd gasp. How could you say something like that? But everybody who knew me and knew the relationship and knew how much I cared about that man, they all just hung their head in agreement. Because fucking asshole. And then me, Matt, and Caitlin was a long time old girlfriend, but also a longtime friend of Kyle, like very close. Like if there was anyone closer to him than family, it would have been her. And we three were the last to leave the gravesite that day. Like we just stood there, commiserating with each other, crying, barely holding it together. So that was what rekindled the relationship I have with Matt. That phone call, because as hard as it was for Kyle to get sober, and I'm sure Matt to get sober too, I know that was a kick in the ass for Matt. And so, he's held it together ever since. We're talking more than a decade, almost a decade ago. This September, it'll be 10 years.
I was 22 months sober when he passed. I had, I guess, matured enough in my recovery that I was able to handle it more maturely, as a normal person would. I talked about it. I wrote about it. I continued to go to the gym, which helped me out a lot physically and mentally. I found healthy ways to deal with it. After that, that pretty much kicked me into overdrive with my recovery. I decided that not only was I never going to put another addict on hold again who reached out to me for help, but I was going to write a book about the entire thing. The book is it's available on Amazon. It's called Back on Track Marks: From Hopeless to Dopeless. The book is Kyle's story. It's my entire story. And then the end of the book is different resources, the difference between loving and enabling, what to look for, different signs, what different drugs, how they affect you, what they look like. There's even a portion where my parents, they, I had them write down like their view and their experience with me when I was in active addiction. I didn't write it to try to make money, thank God, because it's not making any money anyway. But as a tool and a resource for people. It's a book of hope. I mean, there's a lot of intense and very sad parts to the book, but it's meant to be a hope shot and a resource for people, especially for people like my parents who weren't educated and really didn't know what they were looking at. So I wrote the book. I hand wrote the entire thing. I typed the entire thing. I edited the entire thing. I did eventually have a friend of mine who used to be an editor. She edited it for me, which was super helpful. And then I went back to college to become a substance abuse counselor, which I did for about 6 years. I ended up having to leave counseling because the girl that I fell in love with, we ended up getting back together. We got married. We had an amazing kid named Marley. Um, I've got 4 total kids. Christian, he was the one with the heart surgery. Mila, Riley, they both cheer competitively. And Marley, who I have with my now ex-wife. And Marley, she does martial arts, CrossFit, and she shows horses. She's very active. Um, after after the marriage and everything, like I thought life was set. You know, we had our difficulties in the past, but I thought, surely we're over this. Um, well, something similar happened as the first time, and well, we ended up getting a divorce, and I've still got contact with our daughter Marley. We split everything 50-50. Everything was, we made it as simple as possible, basically. But when the divorce happened, I wasn't able to give my patients the attention, I guess, that I needed to be giving them. It was difficult for me to counsel other people through their struggles when I was barely holding it together myself. I tried for a few months, but I just couldn't do it. So finally, I just admitted to myself and to my clinical supervisor that I'm not mentally capable of doing this right now, and I had to move on. I miss counseling. I miss being a big piece of people's recovery. I miss watching them change for the better and go from, just completely beaten down, malnourished, just completely demoralized, to some of them were going to college. Some of them I was with long enough to see go to college and graduate from college. Like it was just an amazing thing to be a part of. And I miss it sometimes, but I went to college once for culinary arts, and the restaurant industry, just the hours alone just weren't worth it to me anymore. So I didn't want to do that anymore. I wanted at least somewhat of a life. But since I left counseling, I've been able to work kind of the back end of the food industry. So I work in as a regulatory specialist for a great company that's, we're global. It's a huge company. But I get to, write ingredient decks and check fact panels, and, if this item is supposed to be gluten-free, I make sure it's gluten-free. If it's supposed to be non-GMO, it's non-GMO. I make sure that everything that you're eating is safe and that you know what you're putting into your body. So I love it. The career that I've got now, I never would have dreamed that I'd be, this happy and successful in the career that I've chosen. My 2 middle daughters who cheer competitively, Mila and Riley, we actually just got back from Orlando. They made nationals for, I think, the 5th year in a row. They're really, really, really good. Mila's squad actually won overall grand champions for the entire event last year. So they came into it, they were the team to beat this year. So we all went down, took Marley to Magic Kingdom and Harry Potter World, and that was an absolute blast. We built so many core memories on this trip. Sobriety's been really hard. But it's all been worth it. I do drink occasionally. One of the things that I was taught when I was in treatment was, if you're an addict, you're automatically an alcoholic. If you're an alcoholic, you're automatically an addict. I never agreed with that. I didn't question it too much, but as I was writing my book, I got to a point where I needed to address that. And I just needed to know if that was true or not. So I decided to try and drink, and I mean, nothing happened. You know, I was always told that if I was going to drink, that, you know, that same week I'd probably have a needle in my arm again. And I mean, this has been 7 years now. So it hasn't been an issue. It has never been an issue. It's not something that I encourage anyone to do. If you're in recovery and you're completely sober, I highly recommend you stay that way. Some people can, some people can't. It's not really a risk that I think that anyone should take. I did it because I wanted something accurate to put in my book, and I guess I'm just one of the lucky ones. I don't know, but you know, through my recovery, you know, there's been so many different challenges that I've had to learn how to face like a normal person. Again, I'd say going to the gym has been my greatest tool in my recovery toolbox. You know, like it helps in every single aspect. Everything that I have had to face and overcome, the gym has helped me get through that. It helps me get out aggression. You know, it makes me feel better if I'm sad, you know, because the endorphins get going. It helps me feel better physically. And as I've mentioned multiple times, I've never had a lot of confidence or self-esteem. It gives me that, you know, so like I go as much as I possibly can. And I just continue to try to help others, you know, like I don't counsel anymore. I don't go to AA anymore, but I still have people who are struggling reach out to me. I still have people who see me on the addiction series, or who have read my book, or apparently I'm still talked about at the place I used to be a counselor, because I got people who no longer are clients there reaching out to me on Facebook asking me for direction. And I'm holding true to my promise. When they reach out, I respond. That's the most important thing. If you're in recovery, that's your job. I just hope you keep doing it. And if you're in active addiction right now, and you know, and you're watching this video, I mean, I just want to encourage you to reach out. You know, when I was in recovery or going into treatment, you know, 12, 13 years ago for the first time, there weren't nearly as many resources as there are now. You've got the advantage. I just hope that you use them. If you're a parent or a loved one of somebody who is in an active addiction and you don't know where to turn, I mean, there's a ton of resources out there for you too. I mean, there's Al-Anon, there's all sorts of, in this area, there's a nonprofit called Parents of Addicted Loved Ones. It's called PAL. You know, they're a great resource. I mean, they've asked me to come speak at a couple of their meetings to some of the parents. Just reach out, do your research, take the time. It's worth it. It's worth it. You know, there's nothing there's nothing more important than being there for the person who is addicted. If they reach out for help, that window is extremely small. Take my experience with Kyle. He told me, I went to work and he was dead. That's how small. It was that quick. If you guys don't know where to turn, drop a comment on this video. Reach out to me on Facebook. You can find me, Matt Peterson. It's pretty simple. I'll be here for you. I'll connect you with whoever I know for whatever reason. Just reach out.
He's grown up so much, and he was so happy with his marriage, and then that deteriorated, so that made a very difficult situation. But then I've been very proud of him because he went back, he finished school, he's been in different jobs that he really likes, and he's a good employee. He now is trying to start another business. He gets along well with everybody and enjoys his kids, and I couldn't ask for a better son now. I actually like him now.
I was able to hear a confession of faith from my son, and that he wanted me to baptize him. And on Mother's Day of 24, I was able to baptize him.
There's very few people I know in my life who are as determined and focused as Matthew Peterson. He has become a very crucial element in my own personal life. I would like to think that I pay him back, but there's, no certainty that I am. I do what I can for the friends that I care about, and he's probably top of that list. It's night and day. When he was in active addiction, you couldn't depend on him for anything. At one point, his apartment was where we all went to hang out. When those of us didn't have apartments, didn't have our own spot, we were still living at home or something like that. Get out of the house, you go to Matt's house. You can do whatever you want at Matt's house, that kind of thing. And I look at him now, and he's an adult. He's a dad. He's, entrepreneur. He, works hard at everything he does. He's dedicated to his children. Like, he's literally the night and day image of what I remembered him. When I answered that phone call, I remembered him in the dark. I didn't realize that he was already working his way towards the light at that point. And, he's in the sunshine at this point. He and I went to Vegas about 4 years ago. Just guys trip, have a good time. It was predictable. He handled his sobriety perfectly, totally fine the entire time. I mean predictable in a good way, not in a, oh, I found him in a dark alley doing something terrible. No. Let's go see this show on the Strip. Let's do this. Let's, drive to the beach, across the desert. Let's have a good time, a truly good time. Not, that lie that all addicts tell themselves is a good time. So, the changes that he's made to himself are immense and categorical. He is not the same person that I knew back then. And as I said earlier, I'm pretty sure he's stronger now. He's a stronger version of who his true self is at this point.
I am so pleased. He loves his 4 kids. He's trying to spend as much time as he can with them. He's active in the community. He has improved himself in his work. He found a better job that helped him to improve. The extra income also helped, but it forced him to do something better with what he was doing. He's now doing things that other employees never could do at the length of time that he's been able to been there. He's written a book, Back on Track Marks, From Hopeless to Dopeless. He's the Salvation event. He's really begun to think about what has happened. We heard under Casey's law and the police officers that this is a lifetime curse. This is a demon that he will always be confronted with. By the grace of God, I don't feel like that's an issue for him any longer.
I've been developing this barbecue sauce for about the last 7 years. And at my previous job, there was a guy there who has all sorts of connections. He actually does meal prep and some personal chef stuff, personal chef stuff on his own. And, you know, he's tried my barbecue sauce. He's used it at a couple of his events. And he was asked to consult a local brewery who was wanting to open up their own restaurant to help them open their restaurant. And it was barbecue heavy. So he just reached out to me one day like, hey, man, you still making barbecue sauce? I said, yeah. How much you need? And he's like, well, how would you like to supply this new restaurant with your barbecue sauce? That fell through, unfortunately, but I am now having my barbecue sauce manufactured through a co-packer. They're manufacturing it for me. They're jarring it up for me. I've got a graphic designer who's making the label for me, and they're doing all the work. But the barbecue sauce that I've been working on for the last 7 years, it's going to be on store shelves soon. Which is, even saying that, it blows my mind. I just can't believe it. It's called Colonel Matt's Barbecue Sauce. Got the name because of my contributions to the recovery community and becoming an author. Governor Andy Beshear, he commissioned me as a Kentucky Colonel, which is one of the biggest honors of my life. So I figured I would just kind of piece everything together, you know, like you think barbecue or you think Kentucky, you know, I've got the Kentucky Colonel, Colonel Matt's Barbecue Sauce. It's just unreal. I just can't believe it. We've got a Publix that's opening up near us, and they have an end cap for local items, so I'm going to hopefully get on those shelves. I'll be around at farmers markets and, you know, that sort of thing. There's a couple places like the Mall Road Treasures that just opened up out in Florence, Kentucky. I might be getting a booth there that you'd be able to find me. Actually, while I was on vacation down at the cheer competition last week, I got the email from my co-packer who said that it officially became FDA approved. So now he's working on getting my ingredient deck and my fact panel. As soon as I get those two things, I'll send those to the label maker, and that's it. Then it's just a waiting game at that point. The label maker will finish up the label, send it directly to the manufacturer, and in a few weeks, I'll have my first batch of Colonel Matt's barbecue sauce, and I couldn't be more excited. And actually, I think my 7-year-old daughter, Marley, she might be more excited than I am. She loves it. Her favorite snack is she'll take some Life cereal and dip it into the barbecue sauce and eat it. It's absolutely disgusting. I would recommend using some kettle chips of some kind, not Life cereal, but whatever floats your boat, man. But she's excited because she wants to help me sell it, you know, at the farmers markets and stuff. And me, I'm going to have to be the one selling it. So what's a better tool to use to sell barbecue sauce than the cutest little girl you've ever seen in your life? You know, like she's going to be doing most of the work for me without even trying that hard. But the whole thing's exciting. I can't believe it. I mean, just going from a suicidal, homeless, hopeless heroin addict to a father, a commissioned Kentucky Colonel, a published author, a business owner, the creator of one of the best barbecue sauces that you'll ever have. And that's just the start. Like, I've got a lot of life left in me. You know, I've got a lot of ideas for the barbecue sauce. I'm going to build off of this current one to make a spicy, you know, a beer flavored, a bourbon flavored. I mean, you think Kentucky, what do you think? You think barbecue, horses, and bourbon. That's what we got here in Kentucky. So, you know, I'm just excited to see what's left in store for me, you know, like as long as I don't get high, I mean, there's no telling.